Good morning. I'm State Representative Stephen Bloom. Thank you all for being here this morning. The question before the Commonwealth is, will our kids get to keep their best teachers? Will our kids get to keep their best teachers? This week, the Senate passed my bill, the Protecting Excellent Teachers Act, which is now on its way to the governor's desk. The bill would end Pennsylvania's mandate that seniority be the sole factor in considering economic furloughs of teachers. Under my bill, our best teachers would be protected and blind seniority would no longer be the sole factor. Governor Wolf, however, has threatened to veto my bill. Senator Aument sponsored identical legislation in the Senate. Senator Aument and I, have sent a letter to the governor this week asking him to reconsider his planned veto, asking the governor to please meet with us to discuss the bill before he makes his final decision. Governor, you say you support flexibility and accountability in schools that teach. Governor, please sign this bill. Let our kids keep their best teachers. I'm joined on stage by Senator Aument, who we'll hear from shortly, as well as education advocates from across the state, all asking the governor to reconsider his plan to block this positive reform. The question is, will our kids get to keep their best teachers? First, I'd like to introduce some of the folks who are here, and then I'll call up the speakers. In addition to the speakers, we have Alex Halper, the Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, David Patty, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Business Council, Nate Benefield, Vice President of Policy and COO of the Commonwealth Foundation, and our first speaker is going to be, we also have Jonathan Sattel, who's from the Executive Director of PennCan, Jacob Waters, Communications Manager for the Philadelphia School Advocacy Partners, and first I'm going to call to the podium Kathy Swope, who is the President of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. Kathy.
Thank you. Good morning. On behalf of the 4,500 elected officials who govern Commonwealth's 500 public school districts, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association respectfully requests that House Bill 805 become law. Why do we make such a request? The reason is simple. The research is clear. Effective teachers make a difference in children's lives. Have you ever seen an effective teacher in action? Do you know the difference they can make? Effective teachers are able to really engage students, develop relationships with them that make them want to work hard. They make the instructional material intriguing and relevant to their students so that they thirst for more knowledge. They make learning exciting and at times, yes, even fun. Why would we want anything less than the best for the children of Pennsylvania? Under our current seniority-based layoff system, the most effective teachers can be furloughed simply and solely because of their date of hire. This is not a hypothetical situation. This actually occurs. And one example took place in 2012 in the Pittsburgh School District. 16 teachers were laid off who had the highest performance rating, distinguished, all because of this outdated law. Those who lose under this backward-thinking employment practice are Pennsylvania's students. We want the best for our children, and that is why we need the passage of this bill. House Bill 805 will protect our best teachers when a school district is faced with economic furloughs. School districts across the state need the flexibility to make important decisions that impact the education of our students. Their future is too important not to allow school directors and administrators to choose the most highly effective educators to inspire and teach Pennsylvania's students. This is not about forcing tenured teachers out of the classroom. It's about allowing locally elected officials, school directors, the flexibility we need to manage our personnel in a manner that meets the needs of our students and the expectations of our communities. Our constituents hold us accountable for the decisions we make. Please allow us the tools we need to balance the competing interests in this issue. We value our teachers, and when two teachers have similar performance measures, certainly longevity should be the deciding factor. PSBA believes that Pennsylvania's students deserve to be taught by the most effective teachers. Yet, Pennsylvania is one of only 11 states in our nation that still allow seniority-based layoffs to push effective teachers out of the classroom. We have to ask ourselves why. Do we honestly believe that is what is best for students? No, I don't believe that. And passage of the Protecting Excellent Teachers Act will ensure that we, as a state, are providing our students with the best possible educators. Pennsylvania's children deserve high-quality education, and the passage of House Bill 805 will assure that the best educators in the Commonwealth are kept in our classrooms. The children of Pennsylvania are depending on all of us. Let's not let them down.
Thank you, Kathy. And next will be Senator Aument.
Thank you so much, Steve, and let me just thank you for your work. Truly was historic moving this bill through the legislative process and sending it to the governor, and I commend Steve, our House leadership, our Senate Republican leadership for working with us on this bill and having the courage to bring this bill before the General Assembly for consideration. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with this entire distinguished group in support of House Bill 805. And for years, essentially ever since I've been in the General Assembly, we have been debating this issue. And based on concrete examples and evidence, we know that failing to take action now to protect excellent teachers would fail our top educators, the administrators that are trying to improve educational outcomes, parents who expect that we will do all that we can to help their children succeed, and most importantly, the 1.7 million students across our state who are depending on us to ensure that they have access to that number one in-school factor that influences their education, a quality teacher in every classroom. To be sure, under current law, there may very well be educators who are achieving transformational results with their students who may be asked to leave in the unfortunate circumstance of a layoff simply because they are less senior than another teacher, perhaps even a highly ineffective educator. Should we again delay these important and publicly supported reforms, we will stand against the overwhelming tide of public opinion and ultimately history. All across America, in courts and legislative bodies, these outdated laws protecting adults while denying students a quality education are being dismissed or ruled unconstitutional, and they should be. In fact, Pennsylvania is one of only 6 states where seniority remains the sole factor in determining which educators are dismissed in the unfortunate circumstance of a layoff. I am pleased that our colleagues in the House and the Senate have sent this important, common sense, and publicly supported reform to our governor for his signature. Unfortunately, Governor Wolf has indicated that he will veto this measure and has provided a number of reasons for his veto. I would like to address some of those issues specifically. Originally, Governor Wolf, through his spokesperson, had indicated that he was going to veto this bill because he wanted local school district leaders to make these decisions at the local school district level. I'm pleased to see that the governor has evidently moved away from this as a talking point. It's clearly false. In fact, this is the very reason for the legislation. School districts, as you have heard and will hear today, have no choice in these decisions locally under current law. Governor Wolf cites that problems, quote, problems that have arisen from a teacher evaluation system that many feel is inconsistent and was not designed to determine mass layoff, end quote. As the author of the legislation that created the statewide teacher evaluation system, I strongly disagree with the governor's assessment. This system was created in statute after a rigorous and thoughtful process that included the feedback of educators, administrators, and analyzed the best practices all across our country. This system was developed from the grassroots up and not top down. The system was developed after numerous conversations with working groups all across the state. The system was established after receiving the input from thousands of teachers in hundreds of school buildings through numerous phases of a pilot program across the state over multiple years. Governor Wolf has been in office for a year and a half. If he genuinely believes that the system is so flawed, what has he done to address those problems? The governor has said that the system relies too heavily on high-stakes testing to determine teacher quality. This is false and demonstrates a real lack of understanding. The teacher evaluation system includes traditional classroom observations worth 50%, half of all observations, plus a combination of multiple measures. I'll say that again, multiple measures of student academic performance, student proficiency, student growth, locally designed and implemented projects and assessments, and local school district elective data. Furthermore, as has been mentioned, House Bill 805 ensures seniority remains a component, but not the sole factor of the furlough process. The governor has said that districts already have the tools to dismiss underperforming teachers based on teacher evaluations. This bill has absolutely nothing to do with dismissal for performance, which we all know is extremely rare. House Bill 805 specifically addresses furlough procedures for economic reasons, and I think this is important to note, for economic reasons as well as school district realignment and/or decline in student population. The governor has also said, and I quote, "It has the potential to remove some of our best educators from the classroom, especially during difficult budget times created by Harrisburg," end quote. On the contrary, House Bill 805 includes important protections for highly effective teachers across the Commonwealth. Educators who receive an overall rating of distinguished on their three most recent evaluations cannot be laid off. Furthermore, the legislation also explicitly protects teachers because decisions cannot be made based on their salary amount, ensuring that there will be no discrimination against higher paid teachers. The governor has stated, quote, "In 2012, a new teacher evaluation system was created to measure teachers on multiple measures of student success. Teachers who did not achieve satisfactory scores across the multiple measures would lose any protection from the seniority they had," end quote. This is patently false. Seniority continues to accrue for all teachers regardless of the results of their evaluations. House Bill 805 simply requires that in the unfortunate case of a layoff, schools start with the bottom rating category and use seniority as the tiebreaker. The governor has claimed, quote, "Over the last several years, due to inadequate funding, schools were forced to lay off tens of thousands of educators," end quote. Not all layoffs are due to inadequate funding. Some schools need to reduce staff in order to right-size due to a reduction in enrollment or because of a lack of enrollment in a particular course or program. We should give our schools and those elected or appointed to lead them the ability to manage their staff based on the needs of their students and their school. Each and every concern the governor has raised has been addressed and has been proven false or not at all related to the contents of House Bill 805. The people who oppose this bill, quite frankly, are out of arguments. As such, I urge the governor to reconsider his decision, or at a minimum, certainly, meet with Representative Bloom and myself to discuss this legislation. Just over a year ago, the Superior Court of the State of California and the County of Los Angeles, hardly the bastion of conservatism, said about that state's seniority rules, and I quote, "Distilled to its basics, the state defendant's intervener's position requires them to defend the proposition that the state has a compelling interest in the de facto separation of students from competent teachers and a like interest in the de facto retention of incompetent ones. The logic of this position is unfathomable and therefore constitutionally unsupportable." Unfortunately, school students in Pennsylvania have been subject to this unfathomable policy. Just yesterday, Dr. Linda Lane, the superintendent of the Pittsburgh Public Schools, was again quoted as saying, quote, "Layoff policies based on seniority have taken highly effective educators away from students and forced us, the Pittsburgh Public Schools, to return ineffective teachers to the classroom." Dr. Lane submitted testimony while I was a member of the House Education Committee in December of 2013 and stated the Pittsburgh Public Schools workforce reductions in the summer of 2012 resulted in 16 teachers performing at the distinguished level being furloughed because of state law. She went on to state that these policies have undermined the stability of our highest need schools, disproportionately affected low-income communities, and compromised transformative efforts our community has invested in. Seniority as a sole factor in the event of a layoff is a vestige of the past. As leaders, we cannot, and the governor should not, endorse a system that promotes failing teachers over distinguished educators. I urge Governor Wolf to sign House Bill 805 and protect excellent teachers.
Thank you, Ryan. And next we'll hear from Jonathan Sattel from PennCan. And I'd like to note that this issue is so important to John and his family that he is actually on paternity leave this week. He has a newborn son, but he's here to speak with us today. Thanks, John.
Thank you for that shout out. If I'm not off in the middle of this, you'll understand why. So thank you, Representative Bloom and Senator Aument, for your leadership on this issue. The last time I was here on this stage was 3 years ago to talk about this issue. So let me give a quick history, because some people said this has been rushed or it hasn't been vetted. The bill was introduced October 1st, 2013. The House Education Committee held a hearing on it with all the education groups on November 22nd, 2013. On June 5th, a year later, June 5th, 2014, the House Education Committee passed the bill. A year later, June 23rd, 2015, House Bill 805 passed the full House and was sent to the Senate. Nearly a year later, May 9th, just a few days ago, is when the Senate passed the bill. So I know we expect the wheels of democracy to turn slowly, but this is a bill with a fiscal note of $0 that has the support of a broad base of stakeholders, that consistently polls in the 60s and 70s. PennCan's done polls. Nationally, there's been polling. And it took nearly 3 years to get us this far. That, to me, is hardly rushing it. So last night, and I can now say it was late last night because you understand my sleep schedule, I was revisiting some of the early materials from back in 2013. I have a file saved on my hard drive. And these were the days when our biggest barrier when we were working on this issue was convincing members that in the 21st century, despite all of the evidence that high-quality teachers are the single greatest in-school factor contributing to student achievement, that state law, Pennsylvania state law, still required teachers to be furloughed solely based on seniority. A lot of the folks we spoke to, and I'm sure everyone on this podium can agree, really thought I wasn't being honest, that I was sort of exaggerating, until I pulled up section 1125.1 of the Public School Code and showed them that line, and they were shocked. And back in 2013, there was an op-ed written by a woman who's one of the 16 distinguished teachers that was mentioned by the School Boards Association that was furloughed. And I actually just want to read the last paragraph from that op-ed because it's as relevant today as it was from 2013. And now I'm quoting, "Protecting excellent teachers is not an issue that should be partisan or controversial. In Indiana, former Republican Governor Mitch Daniels signed legislation making teacher effectiveness the #1 consideration in layoff decisions. And Democratic Governor John Hickenlooper did the same in Colorado. There are a lot of complicated issues in Pennsylvania, but this isn't one of them." end quote. So Governor Wolf, what I'm here to say to you, and why PennCan is, I came out of paternity leave, is to say that this is going to, the budget season starting, there's going to be a lot of complicated issues that you're going to be worked on. You'll be facing many difficult decisions, but this isn't one of them. On behalf of my organization, I respectfully ask you to sign House Bill 805.
Thank you, John. And we'd, at this time, be happy to accept questions from the media. And any of us up on the panel here and hopefully can answer if I can't. Steve.
Representative, does the legislature's decision to drop the Keystones exams as a graduation requirement impact your teacher eval system in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, maybe, Ron, you might have more insight on that, but
This issue came up certainly in our caucus and prior to the debate. The bottom line is, with regard to the Keystone exam, the students are still required to take the Keystone exam. The Keystone exam is not a graduation requirement. That was by act of the General Assembly in bipartisan manner. So though it's not a graduation requirement, the Keystone exam is still being taken by students and will still be a part of our accountability system.
A high school teacher's accountability system, if their student would not have graduated.
The standardized test, the Keystone exam that a student takes currently, would continue to be part of the multiple measures of student academic performance that factor into a teacher's evaluation.
So does that impact the high school teacher in any way?
It does not. The fact that it's not a graduation requirement, no.
Jen?
I mean, the reason that it was made a graduation requirement was to get the kids to take the test seriously, because they always showed that at the lower grades, the kids took their state test like it was a regular test. Once they got in high school, they kind of like, oh, we don't care what this, this doesn't impact my grade. So, while this is on hold and until a replacement comes up that the administration is working on, I mean, is it fair, or is it a contradiction to not hold the students accountable, but meanwhile you're holding the teachers accountable for the student performance?
I can take it. I think so. The teacher evaluation system was passed in 2012, which feels like yesterday, but that was already 4 years ago. And the key phrase that Senator Aument mentioned was multiple measures, right? So 50% is based on non-tested factors, so classroom observations, student surveys, et cetera. So the other half is based on student test scores. Still, with the delay of the Keystones, that test will impact a teacher's evaluation. That is true. However, the data, this isn't hypothetical. We can look at data to demonstrate. And if someone has the exact number, I believe it's 97.7.
98.2.
98.2. I was 98.2% of teachers are rated satisfactory. And if you remember how our bills works, it's the failing and ineffective teacher. So it's still to get a failing or ineffective rating, you actually have to be failing or ineffective in both the principal observations and the tested subject. So in your scenario, it would be highly unlikely, if not mathematically impossible, for a Keystone exam to give a teacher an effective rating.
Gentlemen and ladies, refresh my memory. Is the teacher eval system built on local point system based on that district's demographics, students, that kind of thing, or is it based on a statewide system? Are you comparing that local teacher to a statewide sample? How does it work?
Sure. So it's
I'm sorry, but you're not a lawyer, so.
The evaluation consists of the statewide system. The requirement in statute and then what was promulgated through regulation establishes the guidelines for this program, which 50% is based on the teacher observations, the classroom observation by a principal, by an administrator. That's 50% of the evaluation. 50% of the evaluation is based, again, on multiple measures of student achievement. The law, the statute, the regulations specifically outline that 15% of that will be based on individual teacher data. I want to go through and make sure I get this accurate for you, quoting from memory. 15% is based on local school district goals and objectives where the local district is able to provide. They have some flexibility in terms of local projects, assessments, student learning objectives. The actual teacher sits down with the administrator and sets their objectives and how they'll be measured. That's a significant component, as well as the building-wide score. That's tied directly to the school performance profile, the SPP. All of that, and that takes into account student growth as well as the static proficiency, and that gives a full picture of multiple measures of achievement.
So to answer my question, if I understood, some of it is like a bit based on a statewide look, and then some of it is that look.
That's correct.
And can I just reiterate, out of all the teachers being evaluated, again, 1.8% of those teachers are in either the needs improvement or failing categories, so it's just a tiny fraction of teachers. And to be failing under the matrix, it's a 3-point system, you would have to have literally a 16% success rate to be a failing teacher. So a failing teacher is really a teacher that's in trouble, and if there's going to be a layoff, again, if it's going to be the question of would we lay off a distinguished or proficient teacher or a failing teacher, to do the best service for the children, it would be to lay off the failing teacher in that circumstance. Jan, I'm sorry.
Well, since it is such a small percentage, I'm wondering, are those failing teachers concentrated in perhaps our 2 largest school districts? And what happens in instances, since it is so few teachers, that you're protecting the teachers that score high, but the economic conditions can cause a school district with all great teachers to have to lay off. I mean, what
Seniority,
happens then?
under the bill, seniority still is a tiebreaker. So
If they're all distinct.
if you have schools that are predominantly one or the other, it basically reverts back to the seniority system. But if you have a scenario where it's your distinguished new teacher versus your failing new teacher, that's where it becomes important.
If I can follow that up just very quickly. So just to emphasize that point, the bill specifically specifies, and by the way, the recall procedures would work in the exact reverse, but those that are rated as failing under the system would be furloughed first, followed by those who are needs improvement. And within each of those categories, seniority would be the tiebreaker, and then those who are rated as proficient and distinguished would be furloughed next. To go directly to your point, under an economic furlough, there's specific language that protects distinguished educators, who I think it's on the 3 most recent evaluations who've been rated as distinguished, cannot be furloughed for economic reasons. And again, I think this is important to point out in terms of the seniority protections that remain in the bill, is that for many school districts across the Commonwealth, particularly as we've seen a decline in population in various or vast areas of the state, that district realignment and the loss of the declining enrollment is also a factor under current law. That's not a change. Under current law is a reason for a school district to utilize furlough procedure.
There's politics in every industry in this building, that kind of thing. Is there anything in the bill that protects a teacher from internal school building politics? Say if the principal hates the school teacher and 50% of the grade is based on an observation, is there any sort of appeal system?
I mean, the evaluation system in and of itself took what was basically a 100% subjective process and inserted into it a lot of objectivity with the whole matrix of factors rather than simply administrative observation of a teacher. So there's that piece of it. There's also the protection that you can't single out a teacher under the bill specifically for because they have the highest salary or something along those lines. So there's objectivity built into the bill. Now, is it?
But now they're based on, now they could lose their job off of that. So is there anything?
Well, the same. I mean, there's a process under the current law where a failing teacher could lose their job anyway. This is in the event of an economic furlough. What happens under this bill?
If I just follow that up also, and I would be delighted to walk anyone through the specifics, the mechanics of the evaluation process. In fact, before I introduced this bill, I'd introduced it in the House, but before I had reintroduced it moving over to the Senate last year, I actually spent about 3 hours one afternoon with a local school district superintendent and administrative team, and I asked him specifically, I need you to walk me through this evaluation process. I want to see how the observation side works. I want to see how the data ties into that and how we arrive at the overall score. I want to understand specifically. And in fact, I have on my desktop, I have the specific spreadsheet that districts are plugging in numbers and how they arrive at the overall score. I believe the situation that you cite is a near impossibility because of how objective the system is and the multiple measures that are taken into account, as well as the observation. So the other important piece, and Steve may have to speak to this because this was amended in the House, that I think guards against this, particularly with regard to the economic furlough. There was language that was specifically amended in the House that in the event of an economic furlough, that there would be a similar percentage of administrative positions where they would have to dismiss administrative staff as well, which would guard against that. Is that correct, Steve? Yes. Yeah.
My other question is, Jen, you have any?
Well, I was just going to ask, is there any, and maybe Ms. Swope from the school boards could address this, but in negotiating with the local union, is it possible for a district to go beyond this to say, we're going to protect, we're going to guarantee that any teacher, not only just distinguished, but the proficient, they will never lose their job as long as they, retain that. I mean, can the locals, is there any leeway for it?
Isn't there something in the bill that prohibits it?
I mean, the distinguished teachers are essentially exempted under this bill anyway. So they're protected. I don't think there would be anything that would prohibit the school from going further to protect them. I don't think there would be, Jan.
If I understand your question correctly, but maybe under current law, not this bill, under current law, it's state law it's a mandate of how layoffs are done. So I do not think, but these are the school board lawyers, that a local, I think but the problem is that state law inhibits local school boards from negotiating if they wanted to do those kind of things. That's my.
So then it does become negotiable.
Yeah.
So if a local district has that built into their contract, does this law or bill, if the governor signs it, does that supersede those existing contracts, and is that legal?
It's phased in.
The law always trumps the contract.
I don't think so.
When the contract runs out.
When it was renegotiated.
That's right.
Yeah, Jan, my impression has been all along that this would kind of phase in for each district whenever their contract expired and it was time for a new contract. We thank you all for being here this morning.
I'm sorry.
We do have to wrap up shortly.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Steve.
Just trying. The legislature itself is built on seniority. Your committee rules are built on seniority, that kind of thing. Aren't you being hypocritical to say your own industry is built on seniority? And for that matter, I've not seen a bill that would allow a city, township, or anything to do the same thing with their police force. So why are you singling out one industry, education, versus your own industry and law enforcement or anything else?
I mean, again, this is about making sure our kids, our children, have the best teachers in their classrooms. That in and of itself is an important distinction. Me personally, I would actually be in favor of, and I think there may actually be legislation floating around that would use some reforms that are done in other states like Florida, where committee chairs and other folks in the legislative institutions rotate, that there is less emphasis on seniority. So I mean, I agree with that premise, but this totally unrelated to the fact we need to make sure we have our best teachers in the classrooms with the kids. That's the important thing.
What about cop on the street? Shouldn't the minister?
Maybe so. Maybe we ought to look at that. But this is what we're looking at today. This is what we passed in the House and Senate. It's on the governor's desk. We're asking him to sign it. Keep the best kids in the classroom. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, I'm with Steve on the reform measures, but again, I would point out that members of the General Assembly, the House and Senate, while we have a seniority system, we also have a merit system in which the voters every 2 years years in the House, and in the Senate, the voters every 4 years could actually terminate our contracts and fire us based on performance. But having said that, I'm happy to engage in further reform measures. To go back to a previous point, just to make sure there's real clarity on the contract. It does not supersede existing contracts. It would be as per the new contract. However, after this law were to be signed and would go into effect, you can't renegotiate this into a contract to avoid compliance with the law.
Thank you.